Hello, sorry for the holdup. Thank you for coming again. This is the first workshop of a series of workshops for learning Unity. My name is Liz, and I will be, I don't know, your host. There's snacks in the back, by the way. If you guys want, feel free to take them. They're for you. Thank you for coming. Again, sorry for the holdup. Today I want to talk just everything about Unity and installing Unity and setting up some stuff and hopefully getting the game started that I keep talking about. So what we're going to cover today is installing the game, installing the editor. Then I'm going to talk about what the hub is and what the editor is, and also core components of how the editor works and how the games that you make are made. And then also I'm going to go over the game that I made myself that I will teach you guys how to make. And then we're going to start in essentially the prototype of that game today. And hopefully we'll get a lot done. We'll see based on the pacing of everything. So first we're gonna do this very lovely step of installing Unity, which hopefully everybody has a Wi-Fi connection to be able to do that, because that's the only thing that we'll need to download today. So I will kind of be jumping between slides and just sharing the screen today. And also, I have a lovely assistant, Pavel, here. If you want to stand up, so hello. Yes, so he'll be helping me out. So if you guys, if you guys have any questions while I'm talking and waving my hands around, you could just kind of yell or raise your hand, and he can help you with whatever. He has a lot of Unity experience, and so stuff, especially with downloading, it's kind of very specific to you and your computer. So we want to, awesome. So we want to go to Unity. If you just look up like Unity download will be sufficient. You need an account, so unity.com, and then you need to create a Unity ID up here. So actually, I guess I'll go through the process, especially because we have recording happening as well. But you sign up for your Unity ID. You can use whatever you want. I believe you can also sign up with your school email. You can sign in. But obviously, if you want to use this for your own personal purposes, I recommend using like a personal email. But you create your Unity ID. Then you have this unity.com/download. And then obviously I'm on a Mac, so it's going to show up download for Mac. You can also, I believe you can scroll down if it doesn't say that, and you can select Windows or Mac. So I'll click on that. Yay! We're downloading it. This is Pavel's computer. He already has Unity installed, so I will kind of mimic the motions, but hopefully, again, nothing painful here. Lovely. This is installing the hub, right? So we agree, and I think for Mac it's super simple. You just drag the app to the applications folder. For Microsoft, it's kind of, I'll download a bunch of stuff. Yeah, so you would kind of do that, but it already exists here, so I won't do that because we don't need two Unity hubs on this computer. But then the Unity hub, once it opens up, it will, I believe, ask you to sign in if you aren't signed in, and then it'll tell you like download the latest LTS version, which, let me show you what that is here. This is the hub already installed, but essentially it'll kind of show up and be like, do you want to install this 2022.3.10F1, which is the latest long-term support editor, and you want to say yes, and then you want to say yes, I am using the personal license, which is what we're doing because we're doing it for education, and I think it covers up to like a bunch of dollars, and so even if you sell your game, you need to learn a lot of money to use other licenses. And then actually, to go through the steps, it'll also ask you for these options here. So you want to do Visual Studio for Mac. If you don't have that, you don't have Visual Studio?
I do VS Code.
Okay, that's fine. So you want to do Visual Studio, then your computer. So if you have Microsoft, you want to so the build support is essentially, if you think of Photoshop kind of like it's an editor to make artwork, and then you have to export your file to be able to share it with your friends. The building of engines, when they make builds, that's kind of like you exporting your game. And so you can download the editor without any build support and just make games, but not really build it and test it and share it. So if you don't want to download any of these, that's fine. The reason why I say you do it for your computer is because then you can build it for your software. So for here, I would do Mac build support. And then at the bottom, documentation, which is always lovely and helps you out when you're typing your
What's
code.
the difference between the dedicated server and regular build support?
Yes, I'm not 100% sure, so you could look it up. I believe dedicated server would be if you're doing something with like a multiplayer game where you need servers and clients.
Yeah.
And so for the purposes of at least this workshop series, I would just do normal build support. There's also like a thing, I guess it's not on here. Sometimes it says like universal windows. But the thing is, you can add any of these later down the line. So for example, WebGL, I personally love because it allows you to export your game onto web browsers and host them on websites like itch.io. So if you are done with this workshop series and you're like, I want to do that, you can just click this cog and then add modules. And then you can do all this lovely stuff here. Okay, question, yes.
Can you show me how you got that menu again? Sorry.
Which one?
The one that with all the modules. I don't see that.
Yeah, so it's when you install an editor, or if specifically if you already have one installed, you click add modules.
I see.
Or if you don't have one installed, you click install editor, and then it'll show up when you are trying to install it. Okay, make sense? Hopefully that works.
Do we need the exact editor?
This exact version, no. So you can have.
Versions already.
Yeah, if you have like 3.9 F1 or 3.8 F1, that's totally fine, as long as it's like 2022, because what we're doing is like really simple stuff, so you shouldn't need to, the differences won't actually like change all that much for our workshop series.
Okay, I don't have a 2022 one.
Okay, I think you should be fine. If you have like a 2021 version, like
Yeah,
that should be fine. If you run into issues down the line, which I doubt, then you can always install a newer version. All right. Does everybody have Unity installed? And you know you have it installed, by the way, when you have a hub like this. So you're going to have like projects. You're going to have like your initials up here. This would be empty for you guys. But does everybody have that? Is at this step and can run Unity? And any issues with any of this stuff?
I'm
No?
just waiting for it to install right now, so.
Waiting for it to install? Okay. Yeah, so that's actually totally fine because I will be talking a little bit more before we actually jump into the engine. So while y'all's is installing and hopefully doesn't take too long, we have some useful links here. So we have the Unity manual. These are all links, and you can also just look this up if, you know, this will be shared, the slides will be shared. But the Unity manual is how to use Unity. Scripting documentation, I love, that's the one that I use the most. It's to look up how all the different functions for Unity specifically work. So what I mentioned before, if you're not super programmer, like you're not a professional programmer, is like everything has its own function in class that's different from what you kind of learn in class, and so you have to learn how to use those functions in classes, and so the scripting documentation is very helpful for that. Then you have C#. So Unity, as the engine, the language is C#, and then it uses Unity functions and classes and so on. And so if you have something very simple like a list or a dictionary and you're like, it's not coming up when I look up on Unity, you can look it up for specifically just C#. Unity Pathways I like as well because they're essentially online courses for Unity and they're made by Unity. So if you're like, this workshop series sucks, I want to do everything on my own and with your own pacing and stuff like that, the Pathways are a great tool for both like very beginner and also like junior programmers. I think they have one. And then this community tab in the hub has a discussion, or it's called answers. So if you have your hub installed, this should come up. So the asset store is great because you can find a whole bunch of different assets like sound effects, artwork, animations, simple scripts, stuff like that. The blog, it shows here, that's like Unity updates. I guess you can read that if you want to read about the updates for Unity. I'll quickly go over next about the hub and the editor and what they are and how you use them. And then also, I'll do a little demo of, I'll go over like what Unity engine kind of uses at its core for everything in its engine in a way, big ideas. And then I'll do a little demo, and then we'll kick into doing things for your game, doing programming things and actually making things move and cool things like that. Okay, great. what I just said, I will go over the Unity Hub and Editor. So what is the Hub? It's a place to keep track of all your projects and editor versions. So as you saw, you can install different versions of different editors. It's a place for tutorials, which is the pathways, and then the community tab. So this is kind of like a little hub. I mean, that's why it's named that, which is awesome. Oops, the editor is actually the engine. So when people say, I'm going to use Unity, I'm using Unity to make a game, this is what they're talking about, right? So this is the engine. This is kind of like, it has a bunch of stuff, like this is like the level editor. You have like asset manager, like all your files are stored in one place. So like everything that's in one game will be in your project. And then again, what I mentioned before, it's like it builds the game. So if you make a bunch of edits to your game and then you actually export it to be able to share it with your friends. That's what the editor does. So this is the big boy. So I guess actually, let's see. I guess in terms of the order of things, I will tell you guys. Did the people who were installing it, did it finish installing yet? Not yet, almost. Okay. So then I will just jump into, for folks, if you want to, it might take a little bit because you're making a project for the first time, but I will go over this again later once we start it. But for now, if you guys want to, you could do new project and then 2D. So it's like core or templates. If you have this 2D core, and you can name it whatever you want down here. So I'm going to name it like GDG Workshop Basics. Okay. And then, awesome, you create the project, and this will take a little bit because it's making everything from scratch. You'll have something like this. So if you guys want to run that, then once this template is up, you should be able to see this engine, this editor default view, okay? So while that is setting up for you guys, I want to go over what exactly you're looking at because it's a whole lot. But from the top left, we have the hierarchy. So that's all of your, I guess maybe in the middle, whatever. You have your current level. So anytime you're working in the game, you're going to be working in a specific level. So the left view in the yellow is the list of all your objects. So think of kind of like File Explorer. You have like, you can have like an object within object, so you can kind of like collapse them, which is very handy. In the middle is actually the level that you're working on. It's called the scene. And that's kind of where you can drag things around and place them however you want. You can kind of see up at the top, it says game. It automatically switches to game view when you hit that the play button at the very top. So if you want to test out your game and run it and actually see how it looks like, you're going to press the play button, and then this switches from the scene view to the game view, which is very handy. Just quickly, on the bottom, as I mentioned before, the project has all of your files. So for example, here, in this screenshot of the game that I made, we have like animations, materials, prefabs, scenes, scripts, bunch of different folders, and then behind this text is like items and stuff like that you'll view. So that's all of your like things that you have in your game. And then also here is the console, which you can switch to on your own, and that's going to be like any errors that you'll get will be printed there. But we will take a look, you kind of use that tab when you need it. And then this is the inspector. You will spend a lot of time in this tab. Basically, as you see, you'll select something in the hierarchy, which right now I have the main camera selected because you can see it's like blue. And then here, it also says the title is the main camera. But this is all of your object and all of the components attached to that object. And so, let's see if this is done. Yes. So this is a different, why is this a different layout? Okay, awesome. Let's do this. Okay.
That's my layout.
I know, but it says default.
I kind of
wait,
switched
three?
the default to that.
It's 4 split. No, default. Tall, wide.
Just
No.
reset all layouts.
No, it's okay, it's okay. I will do this, and then I will do this. And it's kind of close enough, I think. So essentially here, awesome. It kind of would look like this, something like that. If you have these extra tabs, you can also open up more windows in the future if you're looking at tutorials in this window view here. So I have a bunch of other windows here. But right now, all we have in our assets folder, if you guys have this up, this is the default 2D project, is our sample scene, which we have open up here, which you can see the name. And then we have our main camera. So again, our components here. And then I will do this. Okay. So this is kind of the view of the editor, which you will get accustomed to as you make stuff. But I want to talk quickly about objects and components, which I already talked a little bit about. But everything is called a game object, capital G without a space. And then every game object has components. So as you saw, each one of them has a transform, which is like your position and stuff. But you can click add, and you can add anything else. So stuff that we'll be using are like scripts, rigid bodies, colliders, and stuff like that. So essentially, everything is a game object. And so to make it unique and something different, you have all these components to define what it is. I will do, yes, I'm going to do a quick demo, which is in the slides, but I will just show it to you guys. And you don't have to like actually do this on your own, but just showcase kind of what I mean. Okay, I'm gonna create, I want to have basically like a circle that just like falls on a platform and then like collides with it and doesn't do anything else. So I'm gonna create a circle and then a square and then make it really wide. Yes, make this like bread, whatever. Then so essentially, to showcase components and stuff, right now this is just a sprite, which has a circle sprite right here. So I'm going to give it physics. Well, first I'm going to give it a collider, actually, which means that it has like a boundary. It's not just a picture. So circle collider, because it's a circle, and automatically it's made to the dimensions of the object. And then I'll give it physics, which is rigid body 2D. And if you have taken physics, the name rigid body is what you learn in like physics 1 is rigid body physics, and it's very lovely. This platform, I don't want it to move, meaning I don't want it to be affected by physics. I don't want it to fall out of my scene, right? So I'm just gonna give it only a collider, because otherwise my circle won't collide with it. So when I press play, it's gonna compile a bunch of stuff. Awesome. That's what I want. So, see how it switched to game view at the top. I'm pressing play, so it has this blue thing selected. But all I did was I told it, it has a boundary of a circle, and it's affected by physics. You can see right here, gravity scale is 1. So it's affected by gravity. You know, I can make it 0.5, for example. And these are different like properties of different components, which you can tweak and stuff. The square does not have a rigid body component, because if I add one, what do you think will happen?
It'll fall through.
Let's go. Yes. Goodbye. You can have a very fun game that falls through the floor if you want. But I wanted to just demonstrate how it works and what we're going to be doing with those. So, to do that, hopefully, okay, any updates on installations? We're able to finish installing it? Close, okay. And for the folks that haven't installed, we're able to set up the basic 2D project, and is that good to go? Okay. Cool. And then, yeah, hopefully if once we start doing things, we can walk around and help you guys for folks that are still installing it. So I gave a little talk last week about how to start making games, and so I will do that same process here. So the idea for the game, actually, what I'm going to do before the idea is I can actually, hopefully, run it, because I made it, and it will run. Okay. Yay, okay. It's gonna be really ugly, but you can't hear it through there. You can hear it through my computer. Yeah. So we have super simple, guys. I know it's really boring. You probably don't want to pay for something like this or even play something like this, but does it teach you really cool things? Yes. We have a speed boost. That's a power up. And then you're done. Awesome. It's super simple. It's probably really boring, but oh gosh. I think, gosh, wait. Okay. But that's what we're making, okay? So it's a very simple 2D platformer, but from what I guess in my opinion, so you know, I have a bias. I think it teaches a lot of important concepts that will be very useful to use in other games, no matter what genre you make. But essentially, that's the game that we're gonna make. Hopefully through the course of the series. Today we're gonna do a very ugly prototype, and then hopefully my goal for next session is do a lot of very heavy programming because we need to kind of do a lot of that to get it up and running. But from scratch, like let's say you're making a game, the first thing you do is you have an idea. So I want to make a simple platformer. The player reaches levels, they start on the left side and they end on the right side. There's enemies and pickups. That's kind of like me, you know, in the shower. This is what I want to make. So then we have the outline, and this is more concrete. So we have a menu screen with 2 buttons. I'm gonna have one level, but with hopefully with what I teach you guys, you can make however many levels you want and however complex you want it, and add your own things, which is pretty cool. You know, and various other specifications that I want to have for my game. Now I have an outline. I'm gonna make my prototype, which is what we're gonna get started on today. So where do I start? So I have a bunch of things, but like where do I start with making my game? I think it's important to start with your core idea. So in my case, it's a 2D platformer. So I'm gonna make my platforming. In that case, and what that is essentially is you have a player that collides with platforms and they move and they jump and stuff like that. That's the core stuff, and so that's what we're gonna start with. So this is kind of the list of things that I'm hoping to get through today, and based on my pace, I'm hoping that this is what we get through today. And so from here on, it's going to be a lot of me in Unity, poking at things and pointing at things. And so if you have any questions, please raise your hand or just yell at me. You know, that's totally okay. And yeah, honestly, from here, it's just going to be in Unity because I said so. Okay, awesome. So now, I'm going to go here. And I have this. Okay, so everybody, you're still installing, anybody else installing Unity? Okay, you're finishing the install. Interesting, so a decent amount of folks, which is, I mean, that's true, it does take quite a while. I wonder what we can do.
Is it being recorded or no?
Yes, it is being recorded. I am currently recording right now, you can see.
Watch it.
Yeah, because it is being recorded, and maybe, I don't know, are folks okay if I start and then we will have, I'm hoping, basically there's going to be sections where I'm doing stuff on screen and you can follow along, and then it's like, I'm going to teach you very simple things, and then I'll tell you, hey, go try to do this thing, and then, you know, kind of I'll walk around and hopefully help you guys out. And so I'm thinking I can maybe start very simple things, and then for the folks that are finishing the install, there is going to be the recording, and then also I can catch up with you maybe later in the session. Does that work for people? Is that okay? Let's see. Okay. But we're gonna start simple and we're gonna start boring. So essentially what I just said is I wanna have my player and I wanna have my platform. And so what I'm gonna do is create a temporary player and a temporary platform, right? Because it's a prototype. So if you guys want, also for fun, because we can have fun, I have a temporary sprite, because again, this is a prototype. This is programmer art. I made this sprite. Actually, all the sprites I made myself, but for the sake of this prototype, I made this little player temporary sprite. But you guys can go online and find, like, I don't know, your favorite Pokemon or something and slap it in the game and make it your player for now. There will be a session for the workshop series specifically dedicated for artwork and implementing artwork and stuff like that. So that's why we're not going to cover the actual pretty sprites today. So you can have as many ugly sprites as you want. But hopefully this is really small. Is there any way I can make it bigger? I don't know. Settings. Zoom. Okay. I hope you guys can kind of see that. I will be also narrating what I do. Okay, so temporary player, temporary everything. So for now, if you have a temporary sprite that you found online that you just downloaded, I would recommend putting that in a new folder. So for your assets down here, your assets are everything in your game. Keep it nice and organized so they can find everything and make it very easy to find everything. So I'm gonna call it sprites. I don't know why they're named sprites, but everything in game that has an image is called a sprite. Maybe one of you guys knows the history behind that. But I'm just gonna, you can just drag in your stuff. I'm gonna drag it into my sprites folder. And there's my guy. Boom, that's what it looks like. So as you can see, it's like, you know, texture, 2D, whatever, all this stuff. And you can just leave the default settings. We're gonna mess around with these properties later when we have pixel art, but for the sake of a temporary asset, you could just drag and drop this guy in. And the reason why I wanna have a temporary asset, or if you don't, there's two ways you can create a temporary object, which is what I did before. You right click in your hierarchy, and we're gonna have a 2D object, sprite, and we wanna have a square. Essentially, we're gonna have a rectangle. So you wanna have this, and then, you know, I want to have it to be, you know, I can make it like 2 blocks tall. So you can have that be, you know, you can name it your player. Yeah. If you want. The other way you could do is if you have a sprite, you just drag it in there. Boom. He's really big, so I'm going to make him smaller. Okay. That works. There's my player. So I'm going to delete this guy for now. But if you have a cube, that's totally fine as well. You can have rectangular players. They're very lovely. I'm going to name this guy player because, again, naming conventions, folder organization, script names, stuff like that. It's important to keep it nice and organized so that your life is easier later. But for now, I have just an image, right? And I want to have a platform. So I'm going to create a 2D object, sprite, square, because a square is a rectangle. And I'm going to make it very wide. So I'm going to go to scale up here in under transform and make it like 20. Nope, the other one. 20. So it's just a really wide thing. And obviously, you know, if I play it and test it out, I don't have a player, I have a platform, nothing happens because they're just pictures. So we go back to our player, we click on him. There's the inspector right here. So we want to have a component. And does anybody remember the components I used last time?
Rigid body and collider.
Yeah, awesome. So that's both under physics 2D, which is what we want. So we do have our rigid body 2D, and as you can tell, if you're doing 3D Unity, I think it's just rigid body without the 2D part of it. So this guy's gonna be affected by gravity, and then we can have a box collider. We could also do another thing that platformers do is a capsule collider so that the edges are rounded. For now, I'll just do box. And as you can see, the nice thing about having like the sprite first is that this collider bounds are made automatic, but you can change it if you click this edit collider button. You can drag these around to make them, you know, thinner if you want, for example. Okay. So we have our player, we have our rigid body, we have our box collider. Oh, what do I do? Okay, there we go. And then, oh, I could do this. I feel like a professor. Then for our square, well, again, we can play it, test it out. The player will fall. Goodbye. So obviously here we want to add, what do we want to add?
Box collider.
Yes. Do we want to add his rigid body to this one? Awesome. Okay, cool. So makes sense. So we have our player and our platform. So the player falls to the platform. Great. Now we want the player to move and to jump and so on and so forth. This is the very, again, building it from scratch. So we get into coding. Don't be scared. I will help you. I will actually here on my end. I'm going to open up the script. That's the actual final end. But go back. So now I want my player to move based on when I tell it to move with the arrow keys. And the way to do that, you might see online tutorials for like a new input manager kind of plugin that you use, which is an option that you can do. So if you find tutorials, like keep in mind that this is like what I do, and there's so many different ways you could do it, and I'm not like the arbiter of what's right and what's wrong. So if you find tutorials online that you think is more useful for you, like that's totally fine to follow them. What I do for input, because I think it's a bit more versatile and I can do more things with it, is make it in a script. So of course, we go back to our assets and we create a new folder for scripts. Thanks for coming. Yeah. Awesome, scripts folder. And I'm gonna make in the scripts folder a new C# script. Okay. So it's just under assets is a folder named scripts. Under the scripts folder is a C# script. I'm going to name a player. Very simple. Your scripts start with a capital letter. Okay, that's just programming practice. That's what you do. Let's see. What do you do here, Pavel? Okay, awesome. This is fine. Yours will look a bit different because you're using Visual Studio, which is purple and not blue. This is Visual Studio Code, and I can do this. Awesome. So lots of things here. Let's break this down. So at the very top, it says using all these, the top 3 lines, using blank. That's it. In this way, this is how you import different libraries and classes and stuff like that. So those are the defaults. I believe these 2 are C#. So those will be like your dictionaries, your lists, your arrays, different, as you can see, collections. So different ways you can store data. Unity Engine, now this is the core of what makes this script a Unity script and not just your good old C++ C# script. Then we see here public class player. Again, this has to match, by the way, the name of your file. So in the future, if you rename your file, you have to rename the class name to match the file. Just a warning. And then colon mono behavior. So this is a class, and this is just saying that player is it's like a child of mono behavior. And that's where these functions actually come from. So here, start and update. Essentially, you wanna keep that mono behavior there for most of your scripts. And as you can see here, there's very lovely comments that they left for us. We have a start function and an update function. This will come by default. You'll use most of the time. Start is essentially when the game starts or when your object comes to life. So if I have in my code, I'm creating a player for some reason, then the start will be called when I create the player. And then update is every single frame. And this actually, just I guess to go into more detail, update changes depending on your hardware. So if you have a very simple game, it might run at like 200 frames a second, and so update gets called every single time that frame runs. So what do we need to be able to move our player? I'm going to quickly go back to the editor and showcase that we have in our rigid body 2D. So rigid body gives us physics, so we want to move our player, so it has to do with physics calculations. I will go into info here, which is read-only. That's why it's grayed out. But as you can see here, what we want to change is our velocity, the velocity of our player. So right now it's set to 0, 0, which is, that makes sense. Our player is not moving. So in order to change this velocity, which is part of rigid body, we need to be able to access rigid body in our script. And so what you can do is in Unity, there's a neat function to get components. And also for C# you have type declarations. So essentially, I want to have a variable. I'm going to call it RB2D for rigid body 2D. But at the very beginning, I needed to say what type it is. So it's a rigid. But you don't have Visual Studio. Oh no! It should autocomplete. Pavel, I'm gonna download. I should because this will.
Be outside of start?
Yes, I will get into that after a quick second. You can if you would like. Hold on. I'm gonna do this.
Yeah, there were errors when I was downloading this.
Errors?
Yeah.
What errors? Do you want to help her out?
Install failed, validation failed.
Validation. Okay. You want to help her out, and then I will do this. So the way that we get our rigid body is, actually, this won't autocomplete because I don't have Visual Studio. You have very lovely autocomplete features, which you should utilize to your max with Visual Studio, which you should have installed, hopefully, for the folks that have it installed. And then I will pull up the script on my end to see. So now we want to get component of this player object. And how we do that actually is every script that you make, you can have a reference to a game object with a lowercase g. So an uppercase g refers to the class of game objects. Lowercase g refers to the game object that the script is attached to. So we say game object, and then we do get component. And we say what component we want. And then we call the function with 2 parentheses like that. And this essentially is saying get this thing. which is what we want. And good programming practice, you want to kind of put your variables, what you're going to be using throughout your script up here. So we're going to say instead RB2D up here, which is declaration, and this is initialization. Computer programming things. But now we can access this outside of our start function. So now what we want to do is in our update, which is every single frame, we want to check, am I pressing my input, right? And so in Unity, so there's a way that you can do it where it's specifically checking for very specific keys. So if you know that your game is only on going to be on a computer and they have a keyboard, you can do that. But Unity is the reason why it's so nice and flexible is that it can be ported to like basically any system. So what they have instead is if you go to Edit, Project Settings, you can access. Ooh, why is it down here? I'm judging you right now.
I only started using Unity on Mac today,
Okay, fine. Okay, it should pop out like this. Awesome. It's a whole lot of stuff, but we can go into Input Manager. Okay, this is a whole lot, but the project settings, which are under Edit, has a whole lot of different things, and it has Input Manager and has these axes, which are predefined for you. These are like the defaults in a sense. So for example, we have our horizontal axis, right? And then we have the left and the right, which is the arrow keys. And I believe down here as well, we have, this is for joystick. So as you can see, there's a whole bunch of different things here. There's also alternative, so A and D, and also the arrow keys will work for this horizontal axis that Unity has defined for us. And so as in terms of good Unity program practice, we want to use this Input Manager axis instead of direct keys. So to do that, we go to our update, which is checking our movement, checking our input. So what you could do is you do input.getAxis. Actually get access raw, which means it'll give us like the floating value and it's not smoothed. So if you could try this out if you want, you can change this later if you want to, without the raw, just get access, and you'll see it's a bit, it doesn't work that great. So this will actually, oh my god, I don't have the, okay, this, if you can hover over the function, it'll tell you what it does, but this returns between -1 and 1. If -1 is if it's like in the left direction and 1 if it's in the right direction. So we want to actually, this is a number that it's returning and giving us. So we want to save this, and it's a decimal, so it's a float, which is a floating point, it's a decimal. And I'm going to call it movement. You can call it whatever you want. But now we know that this will be either -1 if it's moving left, 0 if it's not moving, if I'm not putting anything in, and 1 if I'm putting in to go right. So I want to check this, right? So if my movement is less than 0, so in this case I'm moving left, right? Then what I will do actually, no, I don't need this right now. We actually don't need to check this because, I guess I'll just get rid of it. Because what we could do is rb2d.velocity. We want to set the velocity, right? Remember the component in our inspector is we want to set this, and this is a vector 2. So if you remember calculus or linear algebra, you have vectors. This is a vector 2 because this has 2 values, right? There's no z value. So it's a vector 2. You can also hover over it, and it should tell you next workshop we will have that set up. But I want to make a new vector 2 and set it equal, my velocity equal to that one. What I'm going to do here actually is we have our movement, so essentially, and then we have our original y velocity, so it's going to be velocity.y. So if however much I'm moving in the y direction, I'm going to keep moving that much in the y direction. But now I'm going to have a velocity of -1, so I'll move to the left if I'm pressing left, which is what I want, right? So this very simple script should hopefully work. We'll see. And we can attach this script to our player to be able to control a player by just dragging and dropping, right, like that. Awesome. And now, if I play the game, we get something like that. So it does move, which is awesome. This is what we want. But I don't think I want my player to be able to fall on his side. The way to fix this is to go to rigid body, constraints, and we freeze our rotation. So this is something that you'll probably do a lot if you do pixel art. And so now if I go back and play the game, that does not happen. Awesome. He moves kind of slow, so we can go in and fix that very easily. At the top here, I'm going to create a speed variable. I'm going to have it be 5 as a default. And I made it a float, which is a decimal. That's a decimal. And I put F because I think if you put 5, it's going to complain and be like, it's not a decimal. So this 5.0 and then F at the end means, hey, this is a decimal, treat it as a decimal. And then the cool thing that you can do is something called serialize field, which it's saying that this field, the speed, will be serialized, and what that means actually is if you go to our inspector here, it's very useful if you're a programmer and you are working together with a lot of designers, animators, artists who don't program, because now our speed variable is displayed here in our inspector. So I don't need to go into my code if I want to change my speed. And the other thing is that now I can change my speed while I'm running the game. So now my player I forgot. My player still moves slow. And what we do with that is we do here, very simple, speed times movement. Multiply wherever direction we're going. So this could be, you can name this direction if you want. Multiply by my speed. So, awesome. That should work now. Okay. Great. And then again, if you select player, I'm going to make this 2, and it moves very slow. And then obviously if I make it negative, it's actually going to move in the opposite direction. So I'm pressing right now, and it's moving left. So that's very cool. And that will revert after I'm done playing. So that can be very useful if you're playtesting something and you want to pinpoint your values and make something feel nice and smooth. You can change it just while you're playtesting it. So the serialized field thing, that's what makes this available here. So we're going to be using that a lot because, again, you want to be able to have your artists and designers kind of go in here without programming. And then, actually from here, let's see. Yeah, from here, so does everybody understand this part? And
Get that open as far.
oh yeah, so if you have a script, you can right click to make a new script. C# script, right?
I'm a little bit behind.
Yeah, no worries. Because I'm gonna say, like, right now I want you guys to try some of the thing of your own, and I can walk around. But if anybody has any questions, please raise your hand. So what I want you guys to do, if you have this, I will probably keep this up on the screen. But right now I want you guys to be able to program your player to be able to jump. So as a hint, there is also the vertical axis. So I showed you the axes. There's the horizontal axis. There's also a vertical axis. And it will be very similar to what we programmed here, where we changed our x velocity. You can change your y velocity, right? But actually, we will use a different function, which is... Actually, yeah, you can try this for now. I would say just try that for now. And there's different ways you can do it. So try making your player jump when I have a vertical axis, and I'll walk around to help you guys out. Yeah, okay. So, sorry for the light mode, but real quick, we want to, the only really movement that we have, well, there's details to go into for jumping, but for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check in my update. I'm going to have, actually, basically for the movement, the reason why I saved it is because it could be -1 or 1, and that way I can multiply it by my speed to move my character left or right. But for jumping, I only care if it's positive. I don't care if it's negative. We're not going to jump down. So what I can do here is I'm just going to check it directly, right? Get axis raw vertical is bigger than 0, so it's positive. So I'm jumping up, right? Jumping. Then what I want to do is very similar to this, so I'm going to copy paste it. And I'm gonna put new stuff here. And again, if we're jumping, we want our velocity in the x direction to stay the same. And then here, very similarly, we will have, for example, I'm gonna add another thing here called like jump force. I don't know, also 5, why not? I just put a random number and then we can tweak it later. But I'm gonna make it serializable again because, for example, if I wanna have some designer who wants to tweak the numbers, that way it shows up in the inspector. And now we use this jump force here. So every time in my frame, if I have if I have some sort of input in the positive vertical axis, I will make my velocity equal to the jump force. So it's going to update that script automatically, and I will play, and great, we move back and forth, we can jump, but also if I hold down jump, my character will float away. He'll come back down. But if I spam jump, I don't think I want my player to do that. I don't think I want my player to be a float around, unless it's your game, if you want it to be like that, like Flappy Bird, for example. But no, our player should stay on the ground. So does anybody know why that happens? Any programmers?
Go back to the code for a second.
Yes. Any ideas?
You don't have any down thing.
What do you mean?
You don't have any code for it to go down. It'll just go up forever.
True, yes. And also because, remember, this gets called every frame, and so if I'm holding down my key to go up, this will make my jump force, like, go up, like, while I'm holding it, right? So we want to be able to only jump when I hit the ground again. And so I'm going to introduce to you a nice concept of tags. And I will do this, and then kind of, I guess, the workshop will be over, but there will be the recording, and then we'll pick up where we left off next time. But here we have, essentially what I want to happen is that only when I collide or touch the ground can I jump again. So I'm going to have a variable that keeps track of my jumping, right? So for example, in my script here, up here again, because I want it to be accessed anywhere in the script, but I don't want any other people that are not, this is very script specific. So I'm not going to make it serializable. I'm just going to say bool can jump. And by default, I can, because by default I start on the ground. So this is saying bool is a type of variable that can be either only true or false. So I'm going to name it can jump, and by default it's true because we start on the ground. And essentially here, when I check my condition, I want it to be I can jump, and my input is I'm jumping, right? So this double ampersand is a logical and so it's like can jump and the other thing, right? So this only happens if I can jump. So now we need for a way to set it to be false, to say, okay, you can't jump right now, and then to reset it. And so this introduces the idea of collisions and tags as well. So this is a box collider. This has a box collider, and this has a box collider. So if we have two things colliding, obviously when we play the game, the engine will take care of physics for us and it will stop my player. But in script, we can check for those collisions. So actually I can, I'll keep that up, but you can collapse it if you want. There is a built-in, again, similar to update, function called onCollision, and then, and oh no, as you saw in the autofill, there's onCollision enter, onCollision exit, and onCollision stay. So enter is when I first collide with something, that very first frame, that's entering the collision. If I'm just there, right, so my player falls onto the platform, I enter the collision, I'm staying in the collision because we're touching, and then exiting is the last frame that we are touching. So if I jump, I exit, right? And so what we do is we actually want to, most of the time, for most collisions, you want them to kind of only happen during the collision. So we want to use on collision enter 2D. So I press like enter, or you double click it. It auto fills this magic stuff for you. And what this is saying that we have a variable called collision, which is the object that we are colliding with. So this is the player script, which is attached to the player object. And so this collision variable is the thing that we are colliding with, right? And so we can use this variable to check what we hit. I'm going to, with my variable can jump, I'm going to say that when we jump, we can't jump again, right? So I'm going to say here, false. So if we can jump and I'm jumping, I'm going to set my velocity and I'm going to say, no more. You can't jump again. And actually, I can show you guys. I'm going to do this. And this is a debug statement which will show up in my console, which I was talking about earlier. So I will go here. So see right here it says on collision enter, which is what I have in my code. So right now if I see, I'm technically colliding with the platform, but nothing is being printed out. That was the first time I fell when I loaded the game, because this is on collision stay. But if I jump, boom, there it is again. You can see the time updated. Actually, it says 2, but maybe you can check out this number when it'll go up or not. Oh, duh. I jumped once, I can't jump again because we set can jump to false. So right now I'm pressing the button to jump and I can't jump because we don't reset it. So here we want to check, right, if our collision is with the platform. But actually I'm going to just call this ground real quick, because you know, you can call it platform, you can call it ground. But essentially we're going to have a bunch of this in our level, right? This is not the only platform, this is not the only ground that we're gonna have in the game. And so there's this thing called like a tag, which is basically groups of objects, and you can give this to multiple different objects and they'll have the same tag. So there's a bunch of different ones here. So actually I can go to player and then add the player tag because it exists in the game. Why not? I don't think my code actually uses that, but you know, you don't have to, I guess. We're going to add the tag right here. And I'm going to call it ground. You can call it whatever you want. So I did, to do that again, I did add tag, and then down here I pressed the little plus button. And now I have the ground tag. So when I go back to my ground object, I'm going to attach the ground tag. So now it says tag ground. Great, that's what I want. What we can do with these tags, and I love tags, they're very useful, is here we can say if, right, if my collision, remember game object, I think it's like tag, yes. So this says get the collision is like a bunch of information, so get the actual object that I'm colliding with and get its tag. And if that's equal to ground, I'm going to say can jump is true. So it might, you know, it's complex, but also really simple code. But what I'm teaching here is this on collision enter function, which is super simple. Like I'm teaching about collisions and then also tags. So tags are very useful for different things. So now if we go back to our game, we can test out this script that we have. So we can still move, great. We can jump, great. But now, if I spam the button, you know, I'm not infinitely flying up into the space because I can only jump when I'm on the ground. So right now I press jump, it sets my velocity, but it sets the Boolean to false. And then since this ground has the ground tag, when I check for the tag, it's like, okay, now we can jump again. So this is a nice and easy way to check that your player, you know, has limited movement to what you want. And again, I think it says, I think it kind of teaches the core components of some stuff here. And that's essentially, I can double check. That's that is our player movement. Okay, so the core of what I wanted in terms of I wanted a player that moved around on a platform, and this is what I'm gonna use to make my player move around throughout the entire game. Like that's what we made, right? And it's what 40 lines of code here, but it's kind of like very different from what you might be programming in school. And if you don't program at all, it might look very complicated, but it's at its core, it's very related to these components here, right? These objects that we have. So yeah, that's kind of what we did today. And then I just wanted to say, don't do that because we didn't get to that. Actually, if you want, there's one thing you can do for folks who want to do more. You can try to give your player like a double jump or a dash if you want, because we talked about movement today, and that's the script that I can share with you guys what we did today. Obviously, we'll have the recording. I can also just send you the script directly if you want with folks who don't like coding. And yeah, so if there's any questions, reach out to me on Discord. There's a Discord there. There's also the listserv. If you don't get emails about events and you want to get emails about events, you sign up there. And then also there's this QR code, and it's a lovely Google form. If you guys would be so kind to just scan that and give feedback, because this is my first time doing it and I don't know what I'm doing, and I hope it's helpful, and I want to help you guys out. And so if you tell me that this sucked, then that will be great. And if it did not suck, then you can tell me what you liked. And obviously we only have 5 sessions. Next session we have a lot of programming, so I'm going to go into more programming concepts. And so I'm going to still try to break it down, but it will be like very heavy because like you have a lot of programming, and then you can add on like all of your art and different things there. And I will say that the game that I showed off is kind of just like a very simple game, but we'll get to I'm hoping as much as we can, and then I will also like upload at the end of the workshop series the entire game that I made that you guys can pick apart in your free time if you want to. So it's kind of like, dependent on our pacing here and kind of how much we get done. And so yeah, thank you for coming. Fill out the form if you want. Reach out to me. Yes, don't hesitate to ask questions, because also, it's a lot. Thanks for coming, by the way. And yes, that's all from me. Thank you.